Yeah, so thank you for the introduction, Ellen, and it has been a while since I've been in the information technology world, almost 19 years. So I'm not here to give you a whole lot of updated information about what's the trends and that kind of stuff, but I was trained in some very fundamental ideas about the way about thinking about information in our organizations. And I do think that quite a bit of it can give you a larger perspective on what it means to think carefully about our information in any organization, but even in churches. So I'll just get my PowerPoint going here. Yeah. Define the Zoom meeting and say share.
There you are. Perfect.
All right, you're good. So I've titled this Managing Church Information. I have a couple of things that I thought we could talk about today. First of all is understanding your church's information. We're going to talk about inventorying data sources, mapping your information relationships. They sound very technical. Please don't get frightened by the technicality. There is, in some ways, a lot of hand waving around. I might get into some details, but I encourage you to just sort of play with it, if you will, and understand the larger picture of what I'm trying to suggest. Choosing an information system, that's something that you may or not be involved in on a regular basis, but even if you're deciding whether you're going to use Gmail or Microsoft Outlook for your email, there's a decision being made. And then finally, technology in the church. I didn't attend the session that you just had, but certainly asking the question why, I think, is an important one, and I'm a pastor, and so thinking theologically about even this is important. Jack, my voice? Yeah. I'll try. So my first question to you is, what is in your filing cabinet or hard drive or cloud drive? So just open this up for, just call it, what kinds of things or information in your church right now that you deal with?
Everything. But besides everything, like to itemize it, like from insurance to membership records to facility rentals to who has a key and access to the building, like, and then online, like all of the invoices for office equipment and like all the random emails that we get, like for weekly announcements, and then all of the bulletins, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, et cetera, et cetera. Anybody else got some things that we did that did get named?
I would say hard copy in the file drawer is invoices and payment history.
Right.
Most of the rest of the stuff is on the computer.
Right.
Dates.
Oh, we've got some people. Sorry, go ahead.
Blueprints.
Blueprints?
Of renovations.
Of renovations.
Right.
That's
because various different what the church looked like, and then with this renovation and with that renovation. We have a cemetery attached to our church, so all the cemetery records, plots and all that.
Is there anyone online who wants to, from Zoom, that has something to share? You could unmute yourself and yell out.
Lots of outdated stuff.
Outdated stuff.
Lots of historical documents and correspondence, photos.
Right.
I think I'm the keeper of all the email. So if someone says, what did we do about this 5 years ago? I usually can find it.
It's good, good.
Can I be so bold? It's Lisa Williams, just to interrupt and say, we're not really monitoring the chat because of the way that the presentation is going. We can, but so just unmute yourself and yell anything out as opposed to using the chat.
Yeah. I just can't keep track of too many things at the same time. So.
Gotcha.
No. All right.
Just to let you know, Lisa, for online, we are not getting the full screen shot of his computer. Like right now, we're understanding the church information.
Oh, that's fine.
That's all we've got.
Oh, okay.
You're not getting
But she's not getting the U at the
beginning.
beginning. So are you in
Understanding, not understanding.
Yeah, it's just the end.
So I guess we just tell her, it says understanding.
Yeah. I hope you won't miss too much. I don't know how to fix that, sorry.
I have the,
This isn't the lecture technology, right?
Sorry, Marianne. Oh, can I just ask, will the slide presentations get sent out to everybody?
That's fine by me, yeah.
Did the organizers talk about that though? Are you planning for it?
The Ryan's presentation, I have the file, we can send it to
Perfect.
everybody.
That'd be nice for reference. And
Sure. And I tried to make my slides so that you didn't need me to understand them, so. And so that's why I'm basically reading off them there. These are just some of the things I came up with, just thinking off the top, and you've named a few of these. And about calendars and schedules, they are information, right? HR stuff, you might have about your staff, contracts, that kind of stuff. Like, so why is it important to make a list of all of your data? And so this is what I'm encouraging you to do. We just randomly knocked them off the top of our head, but I'm suggesting that you might actually want to sit down and write a list of these things as best you can. And I think most of you have the gift of organization, so you're going to appreciate how that's valuable. But there's a few reasons that I think it's important. One of them is to ensure that your policy are consistently applied. You probably have privacy policies, backup policies, how things are secure, where they're stored, who has access to those kinds of information. And so to have all of that kind of written down so that you can go through it and make sure that your policies are applied consistently. To be aware of duplication and redundancy. How many places do you have members' addresses? In different places, and email addresses, right? So that what happens, the third one is for accuracy of updating. What happens when someone sends you an email and says, my email address has changed? How many, 5 different places or 10 different places do you have to update it? Including, probably your pastor keeps their own list of email addresses, right? And you know the problem. Someone said that they have a lot of old stuff lying around. So for archiving, planning, and tracking, it can be helpful to have a list of where all your information and what needs to go to the archives. I just delivered a box at lunch from Danforth Midnight Church to Grable for their archiving, and that's kind of exciting. Yeah, thank you. And then I think another one is for migrating to new information systems. So if you decide there's a better way to do this, and you decide that you're going to go in that direction, knowing where all your information is and what's going to be effective is very, very helpful. By the way, feel free to interrupt me if you've got a question or a point.
I just wanted to add to what you were saying, like if somebody's email address changed, I'm also thinking of if somebody passes away,
Right.
where you have to update that and make sure that it's,
Exactly.
they're not still with us in some record.
Yeah.
I was also just going to mention that if we, we keep a lot of stuff in our heads too, all of us as admins, and if at some point we leave the job and somebody else has to step in, it's really helpful for them to know where to find stuff.
Exactly. Very good. That should be added to the list for sure.
Yeah, for succession
For
planning.
succession planning, or just even, if somebody else in the staff needs to know where something is, or,
Especially if it's, if you get sick all of a sudden or whatever, like if it's unexpected, you have no warning, then nobody knows where it is.
That's right. Unless you want to keep your job forever.
One of the challenges though is that, as I think about the churches, is everybody's doing it part-time. It's a small operation. You have limited resources. You probably have limited access to the technology, like getting all that stuff, licenses and stuff cost money. So it's a challenge to be able to be as streamlined. Like I think about, I'm with Canadian Mennonite, which is a magazine, and we have a tech thing behind us, which is great. Like we have tech support, but do you guys? Do you have to pay to get it? You have to find somebody in the congregation who can help you, right?
Mostly. Yeah.
So it's very challenging for that, right? We have a database, so we just have to enter something once, and it's there for everybody to access, but each church wouldn't necessarily have that, right?
Well, and every time you have another volunteer who helps you do something that they know how to do, then when they stop helping you, the next guy doesn't understand what they did. And now you've got someone else coming in and doing something else. Like I have multiple layers probably of complexity in my computer files simply because it kept being a different person volunteering to help. So.
So even something as simple as Excel. Not all admin people use Excel, right? And like I'll send out an Excel sheet, and when some people will come back and go, well, I don't really know how to use that. Can I just print it and send you a paper and scan and send you a copy? Because it's not a worksheet that everybody would use in your day-to-day work, right? Depending on what you're doing.
I'm sorry to say I'm not coming with many answers today.
I wasn't asking you for answers.
But
it's
it's good that we're having this
identifying
conversation. So one thing I want to suggest is, it's one thing to just list out all of the things you have. It's another thing to understand the relationships of your information to each other. And so what you can do, I call this a map, okay? And there's a picture of here, this one's for a school on the slide. But there are these things called data models or entity relationship models, and I'm just going to kind of walk you through one. It's a whole profession about drawing these appropriately. And so I think, after having done it for 10 years myself, that frankly anybody can do it if you just if you know your work, you can draw these pictures, and the pictures help you understand, and there's no perfect way to draw these pictures. So don't get too flustered about having the right technique. So let's say, I'll walk you through drawing a picture, a map of your church's information that might be, it's hypothetical. The very center core might be this entity, you're thinking about nouns now, would be members, right? That's one of your core bits of information is information about members. And programs and or worship services would be another core part of your thing you do. And there's a relationship that members attend the programs and services. So there's a line between those two things. You might also be interested in volunteers. Yes, volunteers are members, but there's some special information about some of your members who volunteer that you might want to know about. So we think of them as different, okay? And those volunteers participate in various programs and services. We also have committees, and so some of your volunteers are on committees, okay? And so these lines just connect these nouns together. And you can put words on those lines too to say what you mean. Members, you might say volunteers serve on committees. You might put the word serve on that line, if that was helpful. And then you have staff who are different, but you might have members who become staff somehow, so there might be a relationship there. Staff who are married to members, I don't know. And your staff participate in various programs and services that are signed up. We have a worship schedule at Danforth, so we've got to know which volunteers and staff are doing which jobs out of various worship service or activity. Of course, you have donations, right? And so members are people who make those donations usually. And the other thing that might be interesting to note is that you might have a separate record, if you will, of information for each member, but they are part of a household. So you might represent it as saying, there's a household and all these people belong to this household. That's another way of thinking about that. So this is just a very off-the-cuff kind of thing. Yours might not look like this at all, but any questions about how you draw a picture like this or map? Okay, so you can take this to another level of detail. Just to say that this is called an entity relationship diagram in technical terms. These are the entities and the lines of the relationships, also known in technical terms as an ER model. You can take this to the next level, which is actually saying, okay, for each of these boxes that I created, I want to put some of the attributes, the information about each of those boxes. Members should have a first name, a last name, pronouns, email, birth date, your programs and services, what date was the program, was it a worship service or a potluck, or whatever it was, and where did it happen. Your volunteers, you might want to know what role that person played in that program, were they the worship leader, the song leader, and donations, obviously. So those are just kind of the examples of things you can put. So this is a more detailed map of your information. And one of the things that this helps you see is, oh, I keep writing down, I don't want to store my first name and last name over here on my volunteers because I've already got it in this box called members. Okay, so that's a process in technical terms we call normalization, where you're trying to make sure that you don't keep redundant stores of information. Same with donations. Now, donations is a tricky one because if you're writing a tax receipt, sometimes you need to have the right name of the person who's going to receive the tax receipt, and it might not be the same names you commonly use for the person or the address that you have in your members list. That can be kind of a goofy thing. And that's part of the problem with this kind of mapping, is you have to think about that you're not mapping for every single exception to the rule. You know, the 80-20 rule, map for your 80% of the situation, not your 20% of the exceptions that always throw a monkey wrench in these. Okay, so I would say that that's the what about your church information. You know, the people, the activities, all the nouns, the what. You also, I think it's helpful to ask these questions. Where is your information? How is it received and stored and shared? When is it received, updated, and archived? Who has access to it? And why do we collect and store it? In fact, I've just added to these where, how, when, who, why. You might have other, it might be why, or who, There might be more things you want to ask. But what I'm showing you here is these six interrogative questions, which are the 6 of English language. You want to ask all of those things about your information if you can. And so that's really helpful. And that kind of helps you get an even broader picture of what's going on. The other thing that's helpful to know is that there are different people in your church and organization that have different levels of knowledge or have a different scope of interaction about those questions and this information. So imagine you've got a building construction, setting up a skyscraper outside. And I'm going to use that as an illustration and compare it to church. When you're constructing a building, you've got someone who's the owner. They have a big idea of what this thing's going to be. 17-story building on this street, it's going to have this kind of apartments in it, blah, blah, blah. Your church membership is that same kind of level to some degree. They have a big idea of what church is about. They're the ones who vote on big decisions, but they don't deal with a lot of the detailed day-to-day work, right? Next down, though, in a building situation, the architect who plans out where the floors are going to go and the walls and the shape of the building. And your council, perhaps, or your board has a lot more hands-on decision-making about this direction, things that are going on in the church, and the information in the church, right? Then you've got the builder. That's the person who's actually in charge of putting this thing together from the architect's plans. And that might be your ministry staff, pastors, and that sort of stuff. It can even be you as well, if you're going to have some sense of involvement in how the information is stored and where it's kept and what it's used for and what information is being collected. And then you've got, in a building situation, a general contractor. That's the person who actually sees to the work being done. And that would definitely be most of you, I imagine, the people handling the information on a day-to-day basis. And then one more level down is that tradesperson, the drywaller, the carpenter, the electrician, the plumber. They're the people who deal with the very, very small nitty-gritty details of things. And that might be your IT person or the person who wrote Microsoft Excel. It might be Microsoft, it might be Google, I don't know. Right. So those very technical side of things, maybe you've got somebody. We had one church where one of our accountants had written their own spreadsheets. Right, so he knew all the formulas inside of that, which was a problem when it moved to the next church. But to some degree, they were in the deep woods with that, in the tall grass. Yeah, so that makes sense. There's these different levels of investment or scope and interest. And so if you take all of those things together and you put them in a grid like this, where you've got your 6 interrogatives across the top and your ownership levels down here, this is a chart which was developed by a gentleman named John Zachman. He was an engineer for IBM in the 60s and 70s. He did some consulting work with Boeing Aerospace. He watched them building complex engineering products, airplanes. And when they build an airplane, this is before the MAX Boeing problem, you could be pretty confident that if they made a change to that airplane, that it was still gonna fly, right? And he asked the question, how is it that they can have such a complex system, and they know that when they make a change, it's still gonna fly? And the reason he argued was because they answered all of these questions. Every one of these boxes is filled when you build a Boeing airplane. Or when you construct a building, you have blueprints and you have all kinds of diagrams and models and information. There's lots of this information is filled in. So in a perfect world, our information systems for our organizations would also have all of these boxes filled in. That's not the reality of the situation. I think someone already said that we have a lot of these things in our head, right? They're assumed. The fact is, whenever you even start a new Word document to keep some information that someone has asked you to write down, you've made assumptions about all of these things, right? Intuitively. This framework that John created it helps us see what we might be missing. So if you were to take a look at this and say, oh, you know, we've never really asked the why. Why do we use Google Office products? Now, that's a trades builder kind of question down here, maybe. Or, you know, where do we keep all of our board meeting minutes? You know, that's a question. Where and how do we store them? When should we archive them? Those kinds of, this kind of thing can help you really see where all those questions need to be asked. And one thing that we learned to do was maybe not to do it for your entire operation, your entire church operation, because that's overwhelming, but to pick one thing. We used to call it a sliver. Just pick one thing and kind of work your way through some of these questions and think about it that way. I just want you to catch up. And if everyone's okay with it so far, I see lots of nods, so I think I'm getting through to you.
Yeah.
It's reminding me of our, where I work. I started only a year ago, and the person before me started only a few years before that. But before that was a long-term person. So when she was leaving, my gosh, all those questions, right? And all the, and developing a manual and instructions, the manual's this thing. Plus online, so you can access it virtually, like you can access it digitally, but then paper copy too, and just all that, all those things had to be figured out and documented that weren't there before.
That's brilliant. Yeah,
Big job.
it's a lot of work.
It is.
And that's my point, is that what you start to see is that just like constructing a building or building an airplane, we're actually talking about something very complex in managing information for our organization. And yet, we tend to belittle it, I think.
Yes.
And say, oh, it's no big deal.
Yes.
It's just a directory. How hard can that be? This is why we have Admin Day, to appreciate the fact that you folks deal with some very complex systems. And it's challenging work for sure. And my argument of this first session is that knowledge about your system and your information makes change safer, it makes it better, and it makes it easier. Change, as you mentioned, in personnel, change of the way you store information, doing new programs in your churches, all these things. You know, if you have a sense as to where things are and you have documented that as much as necessary, that really helps. So your church is not quite as complex, maybe, as a construction project or some of the financial information systems I worked on. But when you are thinking about your information, like a church directory, you might want to ask yourself the 6 questions to see what you know and what you don't know about the system, and to think about who is involved. What is their level of interest and how are they impacted? So an example of that, this is why my admin is not on here, so I can tell the story. Most of you were doing contact tracing during the first years of COVID, and we were too at Danforth Mennonite Church. And then all of a sudden, contact tracing was no longer required. It was sometime last year, right, when you told us. But it was very tempting to keep tracking that attendance information. And so Bonnie said to me, what do we do? Do we keep doing this? Do we tell our greeters to keep writing down who's come? I got to tell you, as a pastor, there's a lot of kind of value in knowing who's showing up what Sundays and who's not.
But not all the congregation like that, right?
Right. Not all of them like that. And so we got to the why question. We said, why are we collecting this information? We used to collect it because the government told us to. We never collected it before. And who was involved? The members. Not only as people's information we're collecting, but the members are the ones who set down the values of the church, really, and articulate that as our vision and mission statement. And the staff, me in this case, and Bonnie, recording this information and using this information. And so as we started to talk about those things, we realized that we didn't have permission, actually, to keep that attendance information. It was not a part of our church's understanding of who we were as a community. So we stopped doing it. As tempting as it was for me as a pastor to be able to keep track of that and know those things.
Yeah, we had a similar story with that, but now we record numbers, but not necessarily individual names, so.
Yeah, we do that too. It's aggregate, right? You're just saying, we had 20 people this week, or 40 or 50 people. In Danforth's case, we have.
But we had the issue though, that you said, we were, as greeters, we were told, we came in and we were told, keep recording the people's names, and I'm going, yeah, and somebody came in and said, why are you putting my name down? I'm like, well, I don't want you tracking that when I'm coming to church, so it's petered off, we're not doing it anymore. Maybe they asked why, I'm not sure, I wasn't part of that conversation.
To me, that was an example of also just like the different levels, right? So the admin's going to ask that question, or the greeter's going to ask that question, but really, who needs to answer that question at some point? Does it go up to the church board or the membership? In this case, as a pastor, I kind of just recognized that this was not the church membership that wanted.
Right.
Okay, so that's my bit on understanding your church's information and why that can be useful, inventorying it and mapping it out. Seeing some value in that. My next thought was about choosing an information system. How many of you have participated or had your church change the way you manage or store information?
Well, not in the time I'm there, but like since it started almost 100 years ago.
Right, that's right. Last week?
But I still have the box of card files of people's membership, and which will be useful in planning our 100th anniversary.
That's right. Yes, that's right. That's a good point.
Yeah, I have sort of participated, I guess, just by the nature of how I've chosen to do the job, in digitizing a lot of things. For example, oftentimes there are leftover bulletins from that past week's service, so sometimes if I remember, I'll stow one away out of the extras, but I always know that there's a digital version, and I can always print an extra bulletin from that Sunday if I need it, so I don't necessarily keep all of that paper. But then the other thing that I inherited as a product of the pandemic is having desktop Outlook, but then having our email also be in Google, so there's like a weird cross. That was a product of like the person before me and what they were capable of doing at the time, because the pandemic happened so quickly, you just had to adapt. And so that's caused some trouble syncing and the records and that, so.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Be careful in language using.
We, during the pandemic, we made a shift from like sending out draft bulletins that people are going to contribute to, and then we're all going to put together, I'm going to put it together on Friday, and it's all going to be lovely, and it's going to be printed, to a Google Doc that is shared, and I send out the link, and everybody puts in their stuff, and it's all good, and I can do it from home, and it's awesome. And we don't print except for 5.
Collaborative bulletin.
Yes,
absolutely.
That's innovation.
Which leads me to the other question, which was touched on before, which is archiving. Like, I used to print one for this filing cabinet that I was told to just put it in there, and I'm imagining that's supposed to go to archive at some point, but I actually don't remember if I was ever told what to do with it. There's a big why there.
Yeah, and digital archiving is an interesting question that I don't think many of us have to deal with yet. Where are these things going to be stored? And how do you do that? Because it's just to set it up on somebody's, Google Drive, is that, an archive that's accessible over the next many years? Yeah.
I'm just thinking about support and all that. At Canadian Mennonite, we have the services of Peaceworks, right? Which you guys would know. MCEC would know, correct? It's you guys use.
We used to.
Oh, okay. I just wondered, because I think they do a lot of systems for faith-based communities, right? That's what they're all about. I just wonder, are they a company, you don't know about them, so you can answer. I just wondered if they were a company that people, churches and MINs could contact just for some advice, like not having to actually contract out and pay them, but whether they would be able to just advise on, here's the kind of systems you could go look at, or just ask about this kind of stuff.
Free advice, huh?
Yeah, free advice. They're faith-based. They are very charitable.
But that would be a question to just call and ask them.
Yeah.
This question.
Yeah, Peaceworks. Like I don't need it. Well, maybe our church could use it, but because we use them. Like we have their tech support and all that. They're the ones who created our system. Somebody from within the Mennonite community it's actually their company that they created specifically for that. What is MCEC?
It used to be John Hyman.
What?
No, Peaceworks was founded by Nolan Andres.
Yes.
But he's no longer with the company.
No, he's not.
And so I'm not sure where they would come out on that.
Yeah.
John used to work for him.
Okay.
And then he was CEO at the time.
Yeah, I ran into him at a church event. So, sorry, I was just asking, what does MCEC use now?
We are with, MCEC is with Barefoot Creative.
Barefoot Creative.
And
Oh,
there's lots
that's
of-
that little office over there.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, I wondered what that was. Okay, yeah, thank you.
Right, well, we're going to get into more of that. As I say, choosing information system, I want to talk about the types of systems. A lot of times there's a question of build or buy a system like you were describing, or build your own or cobble stuff together. And a little bit about legal requirements and privacy, of which I'm not an expert. So, there are general use tools, right? Google Suite, MS Office tools, email software, calendar software, whatever, all those kinds of general tools. And those are part of what you use to manage your information. There's specialized tools, which are designed for a particular activity. So your QuickBooks is your financial tool. There are contact relationship management tools, CRM tools, which are often used in sales organizations and for salespeople, but you could use them in churches. Those are the special, you get the idea of those. And then there are industry-specific software tools and systems which are designed. So there's law firm software, and there's manufacturing systems, and there are church software, as we've just mentioned. I don't know if you're using any of these, but I just took a quick look to see what was out there, and this was a few of the top 15. And I'm not advertising any of these or promoting any of them, I'm just mentioning them to you. There is one here called Synergo, one fourth one down on the left, which says it's built in Canada, designed by Canada, hosted in Canada. So there might be some things there that are valuable. It's a Canadian one. And they all have different functionality and features. Some of them are designed for smaller churches, some of them are designed for mega churches. So here's a list of the features that I took off that website from their advertising. Managing events, donations, follow-ups, volunteers, online payments, accounting, budgets, employee payroll, reporting, emails, social networking, scheduling events, organizing groups, attendance tracking, which we all agreed we don't allowed to do, photo directories, child protection. This is an interesting one. So tracking allergies, parent contacts, and your volunteer screenings, right, for your safe space policies, and even managing your website. And they roughly seem to cost, this is the trend of software now, you don't buy a one-time payment, you rent it or lease it, right? So you're paying a monthly fee of anywhere from $50 to $100 a month for most of these, depending on the features that you purchase, right? they all have like advanced versions and stuff.
Are you saying the cost is 50 to 100 a month for each service, or for that one service that does a whole bunch?
Yeah, it's for the one, usually the package, yeah, but different ones had different levels of package too, so you might pay
Right.
$50 a month for the basic package.
Yeah.
And then if you want to add on
More
social
valuable
networking
lists.
or,
Okay, thank you.
We use, we use a program called Power Church, and it has everything involved, including all the finances go through their contributions. You can generate money reports, as well as record keeping and membership, and it does the directory for us, the photo directory and everything.
Wow,
Yeah, it's a one-time program purchase, and then there's just service assistance that's available.
Right, you pay a service contract kind of thing per year.
But you don't have to.
There's two
Right.
models. You can either purchase it outright, or you can.
Yeah, it's like a disc that you put on the computer, and then they actually have training courses you can take through them, accounting and different things on how to use their programs, and that's all free.
Can you mention what it's called again?
Power Church Plus.
Power Church.
Power Church.
Sounds like something
Yes.
kind of awesome.
What I will say.
All our financial stuff is in there, so it's like QuickBooks. All our accounting is in there. I can generate any report on anything for any department off of it. It's got all our membership records in there. You can keep attendance records, you can do Sunday school, you can record events, all that stuff, and it's all built into the program.
So my question for those of you who use this is, can you sort of give a best guess as to what percentage of the features in this software you actually use?
Less than 50.
Yeah, I would say we have Power Church too, and I would probably say I myself use the accounting and just sort of records keeping of families and information like address, all that. And then our treasurer keeps track of donations on there. But there's a lot of features on there that I don't use, maybe just because I haven't taken the time to learn.
Right.
But I'd love to use it for payroll, but the thing is, it's set up for US, and so it would be a bit of a hassle to try to get it all.
The US software?
Yeah.
Yes, it is US based.
So that's interesting. I didn't realize that there's a common tool out there amongst many of you, most churches. Many churches I've run into, they have a mix of.
Is there 5 of you?
Wow, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 3 online.
Yeah. Most of us, a lot of churches use a mix of, Word documents, email,
Yeah,
distribution lists,
QuickBooks, Word.
paper files, homemade spreadsheets, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so, one of the questions that I've worked with organizations is, how do you know when to build the thing yourself out of these tools, or you've got a computer programmer in your church that can do this for you? How do you know when to build it, and how do you know when to buy the church information management system? And so some of the factors are definitely cost, the kind of level of support you're going to get, the functions, how many of those features are you going to actually use that you're paying for, how well does it integrate with existing systems that you're using. If you're already using QuickBooks and you're buying a system that's got some finance and donation management stuff, is it going to port to your QuickBooks that you need to continue using? And the conversion process, is that going to be a painful thing? Is the company going to offer you help in converting, or do the converting for you? Or are you going to have to do a lot of work in hand converting, or having somebody with expertise to do that? And those can be long processes. Another information factor may be, there's a caveat to this slide. When I was on that software, the Canadian one, they argued, this is a quote from their webpage, that the Canadian Revenue Agency requires that all electronic data of registered charities, which includes churches, be kept on a Canadian server. It doesn't quite say it that way on the CRA website. And so they say this data includes governance documents, minutes from meetings, donation records, etc. And of course, a lot of the software is cloud-based now, so you log onto their website maybe, and the data is stored on their servers or somewhere in the cloud, and who knows where the cloud servers are. They could be in the Atlantic Ocean, they could be in Ireland, they could be in the United States. And so are you breaking this rule by going to a cloud-based system, not one that's storing information on your hard drive in your office? My wife is an executive director of a Canadian charity, and she looked at that and said, that's absurd. Like, everybody stores stuff on the cloud now, so I don't know.
For those of us that are maybe a little less savvy with the language, can you just briefly explain what a server is?
Yeah, so it's just a big computer or a collection of computers that are running the program you're using and storing the data that you're using. Instead of it being your work station, it's something out there on the internet.
For example, Google Drive.
For example, Google Drive, right?
Yeah, so Google Drive is a like that information doesn't exist on your computer.
Right.
It exists somewhere.
So is that what you're calling the cloud? Is that what you're calling the cloud though?
Yeah, well, so, 20 years ago, before the cloud existed, you would connect to a server somewhere on the internet, and you had still some idea maybe where the location was.
Yeah.
But then they came up with this idea of abstracting this thing so that there could be a whole bunch of servers all doing the same job, and they could be anywhere in the world, and you don't know, and it doesn't matter. And that's
And you could have data in many different places.
Right.
And Microsoft does it too. Office 365 and OneDrive.
That's right. That's right.
Those are not resident on your machine anymore.
And even the programs you use, Google Docs, Google Sheets, your Outlook, that you run, anything you run in your browser is running somewhere else.
So this is highly sensitive. If you're dealing with highly sensitive materials, this is a big issue, correct? If you're a government organization or something.
For sure, if you're a government
Right?
organization.
Our
Yeah.
church is not so likely, although that whole thing about people being able to access your information and hacking and all that kind of stuff is an issue anywhere now, right? Church or anywhere.
And going back to Power Church has two versions.
Oh.
It has one that is, the one that you purchase
Yeah.
is resident on your server, but the subscription version is a cloud-based version.
Okay.
I was wondering
Yeah.
if somebody knew that.
And they're usually cheaper too. I don't know why.
No,
No?
the subscription is not cheaper.
Okay.
Not in the long run, right?
Because you're paying ongoing.
Right.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
every
over
purchase
time.
every day.
It's cheaper at the beginning, but, within 3 or 4 years, it's more, I think, than the purchase price of the downloadable version.
Right. So I don't know about this, whether this is true or not, but just kind of, maybe keep that in mind. When you get the slides, there's the CRA's website, you can read things.
Canada would figure that out for us.
Okay, so remember our maps that we were drawing of our information systems? All information systems that are built, all software out there is based on somebody's model of how something's going to work. Okay, how the information is going to be relating to each other, what information you're storing. It's related on that high level, another word for this is a business model. But it's based on the average, because they got to sell it to as many people as they can, right? So they want it to fit as many things. But the problem is, it might make sense for things that are fairly common, standardized processes like accounting. Everybody follows the same accounting rules, right? But your church might not be average in the way you function. You have, for lack of a better word, proprietary ways of doing things in your congregation. And so the question you have to ask yourself when you're looking at buying something new is, if you have those business models, the data models already done of your church, you can try to guess what the data model is of the Power Church software and say, what are the differences here? And what is it going to cost me? What am I going to lose or to fit my stuff into their program, right? Is it a really good fit? What changes am I going to have to make to the way I get information, the way I store information, the kinds of information I store? Am I going to lose data if I convert to this new thing? Am I going to end up paying for features I don't need? What kind of compromises am I going to have to make? I worked for Merrill Lynch, HSBC, the two banking companies working together. I helped them design one of their first online stock trading websites. And what they did was, they hired Microsoft to help them do this. And Microsoft came in and said, well, we've got a product that already does this for you. And it was basically an online storefront kind of software. And they said, we'll just send a bunch of our programmers to help customize it so that it fits. Well, I did a data model as their database guy that was hired separately from Microsoft of their business. And I did a data model of the software in Microsoft. In fact, I could download it, of the Microsoft software. And I said to my boss, I said, these things don't match. Like, what are you doing? You're spending a ton of money customizing something, but they'd already made a decision. I was down there on the trades level, not up there on the owner level. So anyway, but it was an example of a lot of work was done to make, this round ball fit into this square hole. Good models of your information, I think, will help you with some of your answers before you buy or make any decision, whether you're going to start, creating an Excel spreadsheet to track information to say, well, okay, if I do it that way, what's it going to do? So I don't know much about privacy, I'll be honest with you, but I do know some of the questions you probably should be asking about your data. What is legal about what you keep and what you store and take and ask people to give you? What is feasible and reasonable about how you keep things private? We have a church directory, it's a paper copy, it gets put in people's mailboxes in the church, but there are other people who rent our building and walk through the building. Is that a danger to leaving the church directory information, or is name and address and phone number fairly common information that people can expect a certain level of public reveal? Then somebody in my church asked me this brilliant question was, what about protecting the vulnerable people in our church who get, we've got some older people who aren't as familiar with technology, and if they get a phone call saying their grandchild is in trouble, please send $50,000. And where did that person get that phone?
Probably not from the contact directory.
Probably not, right?
Honestly,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, but these are.
There are number generators everywhere.
If you email stuff, it's plain text. Like you can email Word documents. Anybody who can capture that email on the internet, it's not secure. And so, that information is free. It can be available. So then we email out a PDF copy of our church directory. How secure is that?
Is that more secure or less secure than a Word document?
No.
The same.
Not about the same, yeah. PDFs are about the same. So if you really were concerned about that, you have to get a subscription to Adobe services and then put a password protection on your encryption on your PDF file. And then make sure everybody in your congregation knows the password.
And how do you store, or how do you save or share that? Because that can make it private too.
Let's email that.
Yeah.
Or you post your directory on a secure spot on your website,
Yes.
right? But then everybody's got to have a login.
We have that now.
We have that.
We have that in the login, but most people are going to lose and forget where that login is. Is it individual? Like every person has their own login? Or is it one login for everyone?
It's one for everyone, so you can find it from somebody else. And it's published in the weekly update every single
Well, see, and the people in our church that are not ready for that kind of advance, they think they just put up all their information on the web.
Some are pretty nervous about that.
Very nervous, very nervous. Well, I don't know if we got permission. I think our pastor just did it and gave people the password.
Right. And this is the problem too, right? Lots of people have this information and you don't always have control over that. Yeah.
We have a certain number of people who have said they don't give permission for us to, let's say, distribute to the directory to Mennonite Church Alberta or our church camp who wants to know who they can contact for volunteers and that kind of thing. So before I would share a directory with anyone, I make sure that I take out the people that haven't given permission to share. And that's a pain too, because then you always have to be checking to make sure that people are okay if it goes to the nominating committee of Mennonite Church Alberta and stuff like that. But I think beyond speaking to the question of privacy and information, it's one of the reasons that we still deal with a lot of paper in our office is because I'm very concerned about storing things on servers that aren't hosted in Canada. And I know that any of my email that's going out over Office 365 is for sure out there. And we probably can't avoid a lot of the information that's already out there, but it's really the reason I've hesitated to have an online directory or an online photo directory or any of those things, which in some ways hamper our ability to have people connect with each other. If you're driving around and can't find somebody's address and all, you can't look it up on your phone. And, you know, some of those kinds of things, I see the need for having something online, but I'm very hesitant about trying to get into something that's not hosted within Canada.
I have a question. You, with the church directories, you mentioned names, address. Does that mean, like, we also have Parachurch, which can also generate the church directory? And I'm curious what information other people include in their church directories when they print it or a copy. Specifically, are you including birth dates, anniversary dates, or are you strictly doing names and addresses? As far as privacy, that's my question.
We include name, address, phone number, email address.
So dates.
I think we have birthdays.
Yeah, no dates, it sounds like. Lots of people shook their heads about.
I think we have birthdays, we have hobbies, we have where you work.
There you go.
Very detailed.
But is that online?
I have to check. It's in the directory, so if they
Printed
publish yeah, but if they stuck the directory out on there and just took it as is, it might be there. Yeah. If I can find it.
Yeah.
Okay, other than that one person, does anybody else put any dates in their church directories?
We
And is that
but our directory is not online.
Paper.
It's only paper.
okay?
Yeah,
But
we
do
put,
have anniversaries and birthdays.
yeah, we also put birth dates, anniversaries, address, phone numbers in our directory, but again, it is not online. And not necessarily now when I'm entering new names, I tell them that it's not necessary for them to provide their full birth date, or they can provide what they want when it comes to.
Okay. And with what I've had to do, there's some people that don't want to give me the year of their birth, and that's fine. I'm just putting 1900 in for all those people that don't give me the date, and then
So excuse the age of your congregation.
Our church won't let you put in a date.
Oh, really?
Complete. You have to put in.
Yeah, you have to put in it. You have to put it in. So you got to put in something for the year.
But you don't have to extract that information to include in your directory.
No, you don't.
No, you don't, except our congregation wants it, so I have had to do it, even though
Yeah. You wonder.
I'm not entirely sure we really should do that, but I have been doing it. But not the years. I just print them then the day, so.
We do it in 2 stages. So we have a contact directory with no dates, but a monthly birthday and anniversary calendar that does not give, like, it gives the day.
Right.
So you know, June 24th, but you don't know what year.
Yeah. And I think this conversation just, reminds us that people have different sensitivities, different concerns. I think it's helpful to pay attention to the vulnerability of some people in these things. And it's not easy as an organization to appeal to everyone's sensitivities and concerns and
I was just going to say on our paper directory, it's we have a note in the inside front cover that says to treat it as a confidential document, to shred upon disposal, and to not share people outside our church.
that's a good one to have in there. Do not distribute.
So my question is then, how do you sort of like backpedal and make arrangements to like make your information that you've already sort of put out there more secure? So like you were saying, having like sharing something in a Word document isn't as secure. So like, should we be deleting those files, or like how can you
Mitigate the risk.
Yeah.
Yeah, so once they're out there, right, the problem, you can't bring them back. So it's more about trying to adopt better policies going forward, I think.
Ours is exact photocopies of our actual physical directory is on our website, and it's got phone numbers, date of birth, email, yeah, all our kids' names. It's just a replica of the paper copy, so we kind of,
Yeah.
everything. I wonder if it's been updated, or you're still on it. 12 years ago, I should have been updated.
I would assume that most of your churches have privacy policies. That's, I think, been mandated by the Ontario government. So it's good to bring those out and review those, or get counsel to get out and review those, right? Just every so often, just like you would other important documents like your safe church policy, those kinds of things. Kind of, you don't want to go back over those every so often. Make sure you're sticking to those. Safe storage is another question you want to ask about privacy. Where is it being kept? You know, who has access to the admin computer in your office? Username and password, those kinds of things, right?
Locked doors. You guys will have locked. Everybody would have locked offices, right?
So I said policy. Are you making backups? You know, if you're storing them in the cloud, it's probably pretty safe. Google Drive or whatever, it's safe. But if you're storing it on a hard drive, you know, where does it get backed up to? There's some information you're required to keep, like financial information, for a minimum of 7 years. So you have to make sure that you've got good, safe backups of those things. We talked about some of this other stuff there. Yeah. And again, so data models and data inventory, again, help here too. If you have your data inventory and you're reviewing your church policy on privacy, you put those two together and say, okay, are we following our policy on all of these things? So I've talked about those two main topics, and I just want to spend a little bit of time, we've got 10 minutes left, to talk about technology and the church. What is the difference between a church and any other business? That's easy maybe for the pastor or the person sitting in the pew on Sunday morning to answer, but you sit in the office. What is the difference there?
Jesus.
Very good.
He's all the
I've listened.
It's actually weird.
I mean, this is an important question, right? And yeah. I was listening to someone else who was talking about sports teams in colleges in the United States, and they were pointing out that Christian colleges basically have the same motives in their sports teams as secular colleges about, you know, doing the best, performing. They just use Christian language to motivate their players. And so there's this sense in which we transfer outside value systems onto our business practices, in churches sometimes, and just add Jesus as the word, you know. But do we really have a different kingdom of God approach to what we're doing? What does it mean to do church business in a Jesus-like way? Jesus values, Jesus priorities, and God's purposes in mind. Andy Crouch has written a book, The Life We're Looking For, and it's a really interesting book about how we approach and think about technology and what technology is doing to us as human beings. I recommend that as a good book to read. He has another book, which is a very practical book about what we do about screens in our families and our households, if you're looking for more of a practical ideas kind of thing. But this is a good book too. Come on, Miss. There we go. One of the things that he suggests is that we ask this: is the technology enabling our humanity, or is it dehumanizing? If the purpose of God is to restore humanity, to restore us in relationship to each other and to God, and is this technology supporting that, enabling us, our humanity, or is it dehumanizing us and making us different, not less than humans? So, for example, you could send out an email of the prayer requests that were shared during Sunday service that we're sharing them, which is what we do at Danforth. We had a gentleman in our church who's recently passed away. During the pandemic, he called everybody every week. And there were churches, some churches may still have, I don't know, we used to have these prayer chains, which were phone call chains, right? Where, you know, networks of people you call and talk to people. One is much more humanizing, isn't it? And much more relational than the other. But it's much more efficient for me as the pastor to send out an email and say, here's the prayer request for this week, and I hope you remember to pray for it.
Yep.
Financial bookkeeping software has reporting capabilities, right? So what's the difference between printing those reports, which are easily pre-done, sending them out, and maybe sending them out by email or mentioning them in your AGM or whatever it is, versus actually having personal stewardship appeals in your church, whether that's individuals or to the whole congregation, or talking about this together, and having mission moments where people are up in front of the church talking about the things that your church supports and gives money to, and why that's important, right? I think those are some examples of where technology, sometimes we slip into that. Church newsletters. We have a wonderful church newsletter at Danforth. Comes out quarterly, made in Microsoft Publisher. Bonnie took some courses on how to do that. She does a brilliant job, puts it together. It's huge, but it tells all these wonderful stories about what's going on in the life of the church that you might have missed. And it talks about people in the church and their backstories, about things you might not know about these people. And, I just think it's terrific. It's a terrific tool for our church, and it really does a good job of building community. There's an example, I think, of how technology enables our community and our community relationships. And then, as I said before, how is technology perhaps making people vulnerable, and how are we considering how we protect people from identity theft and fraud and those kinds of potential things? Some technology depersonalizes its users by making them into robots. And so I wanted to ask you this question. Do your administrative tasks that involve technology ever feel monotonous and robotic? Yes.
Updating the same telephone number in 5 different places? Oh, yes.
Yeah, what she said.
There's work that we have to do that we can't be avoided, but I think that it can be a clue, right? It's where we're using technology right when it makes us do things robotically. Major technology factor for choosing technology is efficiency, right? That is a world value outside of us about efficiency. Do things faster, more efficiently, be more productive. That's not a kingdom of God value, in my opinion. So, we have to figure out how to balance those things and ask those questions and notice it and pay attention to the fact that that's influencing us. I am almost done. Yeah. That's going to the next slide. Here's my last slide from Andy Crouch's book. He says, a fundamental test of whether technology is serving us properly as persons is whether we continue to enjoy it or whether we become jaded and frustrated by it. And I certainly...
Depends on the day.
Yes, it depends on the day. And I think maybe that continue word is important, but you see a trend there.
Yeah.
But, I think we should hook into our Mennonites distrust of technology a little bit sometimes and say, do I have to swallow this hook, line, and sinker, or is it worth asking some questions about this, doing things more human? Hope that's been helpful to you. Ask some questions.